Good morning, everyone. How are you? Oh, it's early and it's cold, y'all. It is so cold in Texas. I know there's other people who are probably used to this weather, and you're probably overhearing me talking about it. Really, it's disrespectfully cold and windy. It's like blustery out there. It's so cold. Like I get this. Like, I'm embarrassed because I'm actually a Texan, but I lived in Florida for too long and I wasn't ready. I should not have moved at wintertime. I really shouldn't have. I should have done this during the summer. Whew. All right. So, welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. Hey, Alicia, good to see you. Kez, I know it's late for you, babe. Thank you so much for being here. Hey, Sarah Bellum, good to see you. Music City Mom, good morning. Shoes, good morning. Hello. Edith, thank you for being here and being a member of the 6 months. Thank you so much for supporting me and supporting the channel. All of you guys, Edith, I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to watch today. So we are still watching Tabitha Clater's testimony. Now we're going to finish up. She was where we last left off. She was reading messages from Facebook between herself and Hannah Mae Rhoden. Hannah Mae, just to catch you guys up, is the mother of Jake Wagner's daughter. So, and the custody of the daughter is what is the motive for this crime. So we are going to finish up. Oh, heck. Listening to that. Here we go. Let me get there. All right. We're going to finish listening to that, and then we're going to listen to her cross examination because more things actually come out during the cross, and it's kind of hard to listen to. I'm going to put her at a high speed. I was doing 1.25, but I realized last night that I could speed her up to 1.25 or 1.5, and it actually sounds like a regular speed. Unfortunately, the way that this trial took place, I cannot turn on the closed captions because in order for us to watch the closed captioning, we have to go back to the original trial date, which was day 16 of the trial. So, and it's like a 7 hour, 8 hour live. And so they don't have closed captioning available, which is a bummer, but she speaks fairly clearly. So as long as the audio is good, we should be fine. So let me share my screen so we can get started there. After we're done with Tabitha, the next thing that we're going to watch is Jake's ex-wife that he married when the Wagner family moved from Ohio to Alaska. Her name is Beth Ann. If I need to be done streaming by noon because Alex Erickson has a live scheduled at 12, so I need to be done at like 55 my time, so that I don't stream over her because I also want to. She's recapping Wade Wilson's trial, so I want to be sure to be finished by that time. So, without further ado, here is more of Tabitha Clater, where they've gotten back from lunch, and now we're going to her read some more of the Facebook messages. And the reason why the Facebook messages are important is, oh, wow. Thank you so much, Britt. I appreciate that. Britt says, good morning, dear. I just want I may watch silently, but I love your content and I hope you have a great new year. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That was incredibly generous, and I hope you have a great new year as well. And I'm glad that you're enjoying the content and decided not to be a silent watcher today. Thank you so much. And hey, Crafty True Crime, I appreciate you being here. And also, Christina J, thank you so much, who says, "Hey, hey, everyone from Blizzard hit Kansas 20 or 2 degrees, excuse me, horrible, and I can barely see the house across the street. Oh, that's miserable. Brr, brr. Hey, Sherry, good to see you. 40 degrees in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Brr. That's redonk. Okay. So the reason why these Facebook messages are important is for a couple of reasons. One, they go to motive, okay, which um, is the custody of Jake and Hannah Mae Rhodens' daughter. And in these private messages, Hannah Mae says something to the effect of, and this may actually be the quote, I just don't want to say that it is, just in case I don't get it correct 100%. But he says something to the effect of, I will never sign over, or I will never sign custody papers. They will have to kill me first. And also, it's important because Tabitha had multiple Facebook accounts created in her name that were not created by her. This specific account, which is her account that she's communicating with Hannah on, was hacked, and those messages were read by Angela Wagner, who is the mother to Jake and George and the wife of Billy. Also, Billy Wagner's defense attorneys are trying to um, keep this evidence out of his trial. However, and that's what we heard on last Friday with his hearing. No determination was made. The judge basically left it as, we're going to have to deal with evidence on a case by case basis. So we're going to have to deal with the state wanting to present evidence, but I'm going to need the full context of the evidence, make a determination about whether it's going to be allowed in or whether I deem it to fall under the 404B category, which is prior acts that have been deemed more prejudicial than probative. So that is where that is at. And says, Jen, did you know that Brian Winchester in the Denise Williams trial was talking to Wade Wilson about hit in his case? I did. I'll have to let Allie know about that. And because I don't plan to cover Wade Wilson, I think Alex Erickson and Melissa Jade are doing a fantastic job in that arena, and they don't need any help from your girl. So I'm going to give me just a second. I'm going to let them handle that, but I will pass that on. That's interesting information. All right, so I think we're all caught up. Are we all ready to move forward? I think we are. Let's do it.
And then can you read that next one? I'm sorry if I didn't mark that on the very next line.
I don't have one.
That was the last one. Yeah, that would explain that. Sorry. Okay.
About the custody. It's and we both have to agree and that the visits need to be made between George and I. We both have to agree on a place and time, but he is thinking it is his choice only. And that he has full custody of mine, but he's just the residential parent. Hannah said, see, I never knew any of that crap. about custody. It sucks. I'm scared for when I go because they do have brains and money. I know, but it still worries me to death thinking I'll lose her.
Okay. And once again, Ms. Claytor, do you recognize that conversation as a conversation that you had with Hannah Rhoden on June 2nd of 2015 on Facebook Messenger?
Yes.
And the same question, did anybody else other than yourself have permission to access those messages or see those messages?
No.
Okay. And then maybe June 15th, minor space different, of course. Yep.
Now, just for context and understand the timeline of events, the messages that Tabitha is reading are from summer of 2015. Okay, the murders took place over the late evening hours of April 21st through the early morning hours of the 22nd of 2016. So a little less than a year after these messages were read or were exchanged between Tabitha and Hannah May, the murders occurred. So I think that the prosecutor's theory of motive in this case is accurate. I will say, however, that I think that I think that these murders were probably going to happen regardless. I think this was already a plan that Angela was starting to form in her brain. Prior to reading this, I think that she used these text messages as validation, like proof to show Billy, George, and Jake why this needed to happen. I think that Angela was wanting to do this anyway. Rochelle says, I hope Tabitha has been able to rebuild her life as hard as it's been. Hannah never got that chance. I think that when the trial took place, she was on her way to doing that. She was, she'd been remarried, and the trial was in 2022. So she had been remarried at that point for 6 years, and she has 2 children with her husband. And I hope the same thing. I hope that she's absolutely to heal from this and rebuild her life, because you're right, Hannah never did get that chance, and that's sad. She was so young. Muffins Mimi says, morning, young. Morning, Muffins Mimi. Good to have you. All right, let's keep going.
If you could please first look at that marked area and tell me if you recognize that as a conversation you had with Hannah Rhoden.
Yes.
Okay. And go ahead and tell us what that says, please.
Hannah says, I swim almost every day when I don't have Sophia. It takes my mind off so much. They told me not to talk to you because you hate my guts. I said, yeah, okay, I didn't like you before, but that was only because you was doing what you thought was right, and if it was turned around, then I would have done the same to you as they told you to do to me. So yeah, but no, I don't hate you now. She says, yeah, I did everything they told me to, and I'm sorry I was so mean to you and never gave you a chance. But they told me you were mean and such. I said, yeah, they can trick anyone, but it's all good now.
Okay. And who is the they that you were talking about in that conversation?
George, Jake, Billy, and Angela.
Okay. And is that a conversation that you had with Hannah Rhoden on June 15th of 2015 on Facebook?
Yes.
And was that a private conversation between
Yes.
you and Hannah? And did anybody else have any permissions from you to view any of your private messages, this one in particular or any others?
No.
And also, the other part that's important to pay attention to in these private messages between Hannah and Tabitha is the level of manipulation and control that Angela Wagner exerted on to both of these young ladies. The precipitating event that caused Tabitha to leave George, although George is the one who actually filed for divorce, was an argument with Angela Wagner because Tabitha was supposed to have cleaned the kitchen, okay? And instead of cleaning the kitchen, her son it was time for her son to take a nap. And you know how children can be. Sometimes they just don't want a nap, but you know they need it. So she took her child and she went and laid down with him. Well, Angela and Hannah were out of the house. They had gone shopping to get toys for the kids. And when they came back, saw that the kitchen was not clean, Angela got angry. There was an argument between Angela and Tabitha. Then George intervened in that argument and hit Tabitha. Tabitha defended herself and hit him back in the genitals. And then Angela says something to the effect of, I'm going to go get my gun or a gun. And Tabitha flees the house. She starts out by hiding underneath one of the trucks. And then she gets on her bike and rides her bike. This is at dusk and it's starting to get dark. It is a 5 to 10 minute drive from the Wagner's residence to the nearest gas station. So I would imagine, even if you were pedaling as fast as the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz, you know, you're pedaling your little heart out. I would imagine it's probably a 20-25 minute bike ride. So she gets to the gas station. The clerk inside lets her use her cell phone. Tabitha calls her mother to come and get her. Her mother arrives like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours later. Bottom line is George then has the unmitigated gall to press charges against Tabitha for assault, which were subsequently dropped. She paid a fine, which George did give her the money for, but he also filed for divorce. And they had a custody agreement that Tabitha thought because she didn't have a job or a stable living situation at that time, that it was better for their son to stay with George while she got these things together, but that she would be allowed to see her son. It took a year for her to be able to see her son. So that's what's been going on in the background while these conversations are taking place.
And put you in what's been marked as State's Exhibit EE6. There's two different areas.
Good morning, Carol. Good to see you, babe. Also, I'm sorry I missed this
The first one in
comment.
November
Good morning, little
of
bit of
2015.
package. Good to
At
see
this
you.
point, do you know that Hannah is pregnant at that point with her second child? Okay. And if you can look at the one where it starts with you saying something to her, and there's only two, well, I guess you can go 3 lines there. So go ahead and look at that and tell me if you recognize that as a conversation that you had with Hannah.
Yes.
And if you could tell us that.
The first one here, right?
Where it starts out, LOL. Yes, yep.
I said, LOL, well, at least this time you don't have to have someone tell you how to take care of your kid, and Hannah said true.
And again, can you tell us what you're referring to there?
The baby that Hannah was carrying in these messages was her second, and does not belong to the Wagners, so they can't tell her what to do with it.
Okay. And then I believe there's another one on November 11th that starts with yelp.
Hannah said, yep, things were different. I had my family together, but it's better this way. I said, yeah, that's what I tell myself to keep me going, is that no, my family all under one roof, but at least my son won't grow up around a mommy and a daddy fighting all the time. Hannah said, me and Jake didn't fight a lot around Sophie. Angela always took her. The day he choked me, I was beyond done.
And then can you read that next one? I'm sorry if I didn't mark that on the very next line.
I don't have one.
Oh,
That's the
well,
last line.
that would explain that, sorry. Okay, this EE7 will finish that conversation at the very top line.
I said, yeah, she would do the same to us, but I think that if we moved out, then we would probably still be together because I still love him. I really do. I always have and always will, but I couldn't take having to ask to do something with my own son. And then that night, he wouldn't let me go outside by myself for a few minutes to cool off. So I got loud and then he slapped me. Then Angela came out and told George she was going to go get the gun after throwing a board at me. But yet I'm the one that got in trouble and almost got arrested and went to jail.
Okay. And again, Ms. Claytor, is that a conversation that you had with Hannah Rhoden on November 11th of 2010 on
Yes.
Facebook? Okay. And once again, did anybody else have your permission to access those messages or with them at all?
No.
Okay, and then the next November.
I can only imagine the level of anger and blood boiling because of the type of person that Angela Wagner is when she was reading these messages. I think that she likely was livid and likely was thinking to herself, these ungrateful witches, you know, I put a roof over their head and I took care of their children and, you know, all of the things, when the truth of the matter is she meddled, she was controlling, and she didn't help Hannah and Tabitha with their children. She took over raising their children, you know, and wouldn't let the girls be to their children because Angela always knew better. Ugh, she's the worst. All right, here we go.
11th, where you say almost 5 years, or Hannah says almost 5 years, sorry. Is that on that?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
He's almost 5 years and a marriage down the drain. We still have matching tattoos, and he still tells me he loves me and is waiting for me to come home. I just don't see that happening, honestly. I don't want to live like that. I said, I don't blame you, nor do I. Hannah said, if they could all change their ways of being controlling, and I could actually leave to go see my mom and dad without them flipping out, it would have been different. Me and Jake have been split up for 8 months, and I'm in it, so that just made me feel like a big whore.
Okay. So once again, Ms. Claytor, is that a conversation that you had with Hannah Rhoden through Facebook on November 5th of 2015?
Yes.
And did anybody else other than yourself have permission to access that message or anything else?
No.
Anything else marked on yours? 15th?
Yes.
Okay. Starting with, he's still not, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I said, he's still not going to let me see him. Every time I go to see him, he's always saying that he has to work on Bernie's truck. Hannah said, so Angela is always there? I said, yeah, I know. And I asked him what the problem was there when she was there, and he said she can't just stop what she's doing. So him, whatever, I'm just going to take his ass to court because I'm done with their stupid-ass games. And Hannah said, and that's always what they say, right? That he's working on the truck every time.
And also, I want to point out that although Hannah was much younger than Tabitha, the dynamic that existed between Hannah and the Wagners was different. It was different for a couple of reasons. One, Billy Wagner and Hannah Mae's father, Rhodens Sr., were friends. They lifelong friends, like they'd known each other forever and ever. So that was different. And then, did I forget to say good morning to Cement Shoes? Good morning, Cement Shoes. I'm sorry. I think I forgot to say good morning to you. So sorry. I apologize. You know, I'm always glad to see you. Sorry about that. So while Hannah wasn't treated great, I think that Tabitha was treated worse than Hannah was in that sense. And I think that Angela Wagner recognized that it was going to be impossible for her to enforce Hannah communicating with her mom and her dad, with her family, the way that she did with Tabitha. Um, so in some aspects, Hannah had it a little bit better than Tabitha did, but it wasn't, you know, misery is still misery. There's just different levels of misery, and control is still control. There's just different levels of control. And I think that um, for Hannah Mae's part, she was under slightly less control, but she was under control nonetheless. So, oh God, I don't even like to use the word nonetheless anymore because it's a word that Sarah Boone uses very, very frequently, and it just irks my whole soul. All right, here we go.
And, yep. You got this thing? Any words and marks, exhibit EE8. That conversation continues at the top.
This as well. Rochelle says likely because Hannah was also underage. And here's this is why a custody battle with the Wagner, for the most part, with Tabitha and Hannah would have been particularly scary to them. Because typically when there is a custody battle, usually there is an attorney ad litem that is appointed to represent the children. Okay. And when that happens, there's, they do a home stay. All manner of things are looked into, including finance. Certainly the fact that Hannah was 13 and Jake was 18 when they got together would have been an issue, because even under the Romeo and Juliet laws, typically the largest age gap is 4 years. Obviously, there's 5 between Jake and Hannah. It would have opened up a gigantic can of worms that the Wagners didn't want opened. And furthermore, as it pertains to Tabitha, she participated in the arson and insurance fraud home on Bethel Hill. The Wagner family burnt that home down and committed insurance fraud. And she helped. She moved belongings from the home to another structure on the property. She also helped Angela Wagner create receipts, which was items that were supposed to have been in the home, with their value, all the things that is part of the insurance fraud. And so that was part of the way that Angela controlled everybody in that. Her son and their significant others, because she made them complicit in crimes. So to battle with Tabitha being a party to a crime, it's conceivable that Angela would have been worried that she would have spilled the beans on the whole arson insurance fraud debacle, extravaganza, crime. Good morning, Jen. Good morning, Rachel. I appreciate you being here. All right, sleep tight because it's late, babe. I get it. All right, here we go. Oh, also, if you guys would take a moment to just give your girl a thumbs up or thumbs down, whichever you feel I deserve. Either way, I'm not going to judge, but do it for the algorithm. Do all the YouTubey things. All right, here we go.
I said, yeah, he always waits the day of and says, sorry, Brenda called, I'll text when I'm done. And then I don't hear from for like a week. Hannah says, so just take him back to court and get a good lawyer. I said, I'm gonna have to, but I don't have $1,000 to do it, and that's what it takes just to get started. To get it started. That don't include all of everything. Hannah said, I know people who would let you borrow it. You know that.
Good morning, who
And-
knew? I'm going to check that out.
Once again,
Thank you
Ms.
so
Claytor, what
much.
conversation that you had with Hannah Rhodens on Messenger on November 15th of 2015?
Yes.
Okay. And specifically about your efforts to...
Sure is.
Yes.
Ma Barker looking
And
like a
once again,
Girl
did anyone
Scout.
have your permission to access that?
No.
Okay, and then I believe it should be marked as, you saying, oh, I do miss him?
I said, oh, I do miss him very much. It kills me every day. See, I can't say I know the exact feeling, but I know I miss Suds like crazy when I don't have her. And then Hannah says, I bet you're glad you get to see all of your family when you want now.
Smiley face.
Yeah.
Okay. And Ms. Claytor, is that a conversation that you had with Hannah Rhoden on November 28th of 2015?
Yes.
And once again, did anybody else have your permission to access your Facebook messages at that time?
No.
Angie, what's been marked as State's Exhibit EE9? If you're going to do that in public, I guess we'll start with, I think it's the very top line on yours, correct?
Yeah.
From February of 2016, February 28th.
Hannah said, yeah, I took and got Suds today. She loves them, but her dad's mad. I said, yeah, I'd say he is, but she's old enough that you can tell her to leave him alone. And he can get over it. It's not like you're putting a tattoo on her. Hannah says, yeah, she doesn't bother them. I said, yeah, so I don't see the problem. I've been mad too. Hannah said, she has me blocked and doesn't talk to me. I know Jake said she misses the relationship that me and her had, but in getting on Facebook and seeing my profile picture with Sophie and Corey.
And
Good
once
morning,
again,
No
Ms. Claytor, is that a
Madness. You're
conversation you had with
welcome.
Hannah Rhoden
I'm glad
on
that
February
you're
29th of 2016 through Facebook?
Yes.
And once again, at that time, did anybody else have your permission to access your Facebook and view those messages?
No.
And then, 414, where it says, I was gonna see Vine.
I said, I was gonna go see Vine on my birthday. He went to Granny BS and stayed there till like 6. And though the week, he said he's working day to night. Days he go to Metro and Costco and all of that. Like, he will think perhaps I'll give him the paper to take him to court and tell him I'm pregnant.
Good morning, Sunday
I
Doodle.
said, I'm not telling him till the day I hand him the papers. I want to see the look of his face when I tell him Vine's going to be a big baby and that he's not bad. Hannah says, oh, well, they don't go to Bass Pro and Costco that much. I said, he says every Sunday they go as a family trip.
I'm sorry, what was that last line?
I said, he says every Sunday they go as a family trip.
Good morning,
Okay.
Mel Mel,
And then-
whatever. Here's your head pet, babe. Good to see you.
Just stop you there for a moment.
When
Is
do
that
you do
a
these
conversation
things?
that you had with Hannah
Good
Rhoden
noodle.
on April 14th of 2016?
Yes.
Okay. With Hannah Rhoden and without no one else's permission to access it other than yourself?
Yes.
Okay. And then, continuing on April 14th, where it says Jake still,
Hannah said, Jake still tells me pretty much everything. He wants Kylie to be his so bad it's unreal. He said even if she wasn't, he wanted her. He was going to buy me the pastor's house and everything. I was going to go up to Alaska for 6 months, then come back, but I didn't. And I told him no thanks on the offer. I'm happy now.
I'm happy
Or
with.
I'm happy how I am. I said, yeah, that's crazy. And I mean, I understand his point, but at some point in time, he's going to throw it in your face that he's taking care of a kid that you had by another man and all that crap. And it's going to do nothing but hurt her feelings, but hurt her and make her feel unwanted and like dirt. You're a lot better.
Hold the phone, back the truck up. This is completely a sidebar, but General says, General, have you seen Brother Counsel's video? Unsealed Adelson trial hearing about Robert Adelson testifying for the state. OMG. I have not. And when I am done with this, I will be watching that. Thank you for that, because that is another trial I am watching, waiting for Donna's turn. And I'm highly anticipating it because for those of you that don't know, aren't familiar with that case, it goes back quite a ways to the murder of law professor Dan Martell. This is another situation where the motive for murder is custody of children. And Donna Adelson is the puppeteer, the master, the mastermind, this whole murder scheme. And she involved her son, Charlie Adelson, in it. And then Charlie involved his ex-girlfriend. His ex-girlfriend involved ex-current. She's ex now. She was current at one point. She involved her baby daddy. The baby daddy involved his friend and associate. And it is a whole huge mess. There's been all kinds of things happening, and I'm going to cover that after I get done with the Wagner situation. OMG. I cannot wait to watch that, because I know that there is a brother, that Charlie and Wendy have a brother, Robert, and that I've never heard from Robert. And my mind is with this, because I always wanted to know where he stood, what he thought, Yikes on bikes. This is exciting. Okay, here we go. Sad, obviously, but to hear from him is exciting.
You're off where you are now, and you can see it in your face that you are a lot happier now. And I said, exactly, and I love Corey more than I could have imagined that I would. It means so much to me. I said, yeah, and with what I read on Facebook, he loves you just the same. Hannah said he wanted me to move in with him, but I don't want to take things so fast. I mean, he accepts Kylie because I got pregnant around the first time we ever done anything, but I know who Kylie's sperm donor is. Her father is Corey, but DNA doesn't mean anything. I said, no, DNA don't mean nothing. My baby's sperm donor is a douche, but Christian is more than happy. In fact, he is happier than me, LOL, and that's like massively happy, LOL. Anywho, he's more than happy to be the baby's dad and help me raise him or her.
Okay. State's Exhibit EE10 at the very top, there's one line that finishes that conversation.
Hannah said, Corey's great in every single way. He loves Sophia, even though she's a brat. He's great with her. He's raised a baby with Down syndrome, and then her mom left him and took her after she swore she would never do that. So he's kind of worried that I would do the thing, but I'm not going to do that to him.
Okay. And Ms. Claytor, the last part, or the first part of that conversation in State's Exhibit EE9, and then the last part of it at the top of EE10, you tell us if that accurately reflects a conversation that you had with Hannah Rhoden on April 14th of 2016 via Facebook Messenger.
Yes.
And again, same question, did anybody have your permission to view your Facebook Messenger in any way at that time?
No.
Okay, so that last exchange was a week before the murders happened. And I had something else to say, but then I forgot what it was that I was going to say. Oh, I think also the other moving part to all of this is that both Tabitha and Hannah had moved on. They were with different people. Hannah was pregnant. They were moving away from the Wagners and the Wagner sons. And Angela was most assuredly, definitely losing her control and her grip on not only them, but their children as well. It was only a matter of time. And that was going to be that was a big, huge issue for Angela. She liked control.
Okay, going to the I'm here, I think it's April 16th of 2016.
I said, I'm here. George and I are looking for Angela and Vine. And Hannah said, how's it working out? I said, couldn't find them. I left. Hannah said, you know, he probably told her he was coming. I said, yeah, more than likely.
Okay.
Hold on a minute, because also another for me. I didn't know that. I will definitely go and check that out, Rochelle. Thank you so much. That Rochelle says Robert Adelson spoke on Wonder Why over my dead body podcast. I will absolutely go check that out. Thank you so much. Let me rewind this because I want to hear what she says here. All right, here we go.
I said, I'm here. George.
We have your permission to use your Facebook Messenger in any way at that time?
No.
Okay, going to the I'm here, I think it's April 16th of 2016.
I said, I'm here. George and I are looking for Angela and Vine. And Hannah said, how's that working out? I said, couldn't find them. I left. And I said, you know, he probably told her that he was coming. I said, yeah, more than likely.
Okay. And again, Ms. Claytor, can you tell us if that was a conversation you had on April 16th of 2016 with Hannah Rhodens?
Yes.
And again, are you describing an effort when you're trying to see your son?
Yes.
At that point. And do you know where you were at the time?
I was at swap days in Lucasville.
Okay. And was there an expectation for you to see Vine today?
Yes. George had met me at the gate and walked through the aisles at the swap day, trying to find Angela and my son.
Okay. And were you successful in then taking you to 421?
Hold on before I forget this, because I think it just reminds me they just panned over to George. Although George never, I think he may have raised an eyebrow or two a couple of times during Tabitha's testimony, if I'm remembering correctly. For the most part, he sat pretty emotionless for the entirety of the trial, really. Gave no face at all, just blank. But he took either he was taking copious notes, he was writing out a grocery list for his commissary, or he was writing down points of contention and arguments for his counsel. I'm not sure which, but if I remember correctly, and it has been a couple of years, so cut me some slack if it's not 100% accurate, but when Tabitha is testifying, this is the most writing that I saw George do. The rest of the time, yeah, he did kind of write, but it almost looked like, just from the way the pen was moving, that it was more like doodles than actual writing. And he spoke to his attorneys frequently during her testimony as well.
Will you say, how's that new baby doing?
Hi, look, good to see you. Good morning.
I said, just lay her down in her crib. She's doing great. Already gained an ounce and a half since I had her. I'll tell you when you have your baby. I hope you get to let Vine meet the baby. I went to see Sophia today, and they were so excited. He said she's tiny.
And again, Ms. Claytor, can you tell us if that is a conversation that you had with Hannah Rhodens on April 21st of 2016?
Yes.
And at that point, she had her infant daughter, correct?
Yes.
I will say this, you guys. Now, April 21st, that is the day of the murders. The date, I should say, because later it happened shortly. It started, before midnight, past midnight. So that's why it's the 21st and the 22nd.
Okay. And then,
like, you guys don't know how time works. I'm sorry.
Did anybody have your permission to access your Facebook and view those on April 21st of 2016?
No.
going
You're
to
right. Italy
a later
loves DA.
conversation on
It
April
is
21st,
heartbreaking.
where you say, yeah, I hate saying this? You see that?
Yes.
Okay.
I said, yeah, I hate saying this because he won't let me see Vine, but seeing him at swaps brought back some feelings that I really don't know about. He keeps saying that he only has a few more years to wait till he gets me back because he had to wait 6 years the last time. I keep telling him that the only possible way him and I could ever get back together is if he marries Angela and let me have a house to clean it the way I want. I want the way I want and when I want. And her opinion never mattered because it would be mine and not hers. Jake is never moving from there, but I know Jake hasn't been with anyone since we split up. He said he doesn't have the time and he only wants one person. I said, yeah, I could see him saying that and it being true, but you have to work for you and what makes you happy, same as I do. Hannah said he wants a DNA test. Yeah, I was shocked when we split up too. It was my fault, but I was scared. I had the treat over my shoulders. That's a threat. Sorry.
It's okay.
Over my shoulders. If I ever tried leaving, nobody would find me. And I see what happened the night you left, and I know what would happen if they would have gotten you back to the house.
Okay. And again, it does continue on here. I can give you that as well, but is that a conversation that you had with him on April 21st, 2016?
Yes.
All right. Now, the reason that's important is because at this point, obviously, nothing has happened yet. I mean, Anna is still alive. Her family is still alive, right? But just for a few more hours. So the reason this testimony is so important in Georgia's case and overall is because these are just two girls who've been through the same thing with the same family, just they were with brothers. So, you know, they have no reason to lie. You know, they have no reason to exaggerate. They have no reason to make anything up. They're just having a conversation. They're basically trauma bonding, if I really had to put a term on it, because they both went through the same. And even so, like when we were listening last night to Tabitha testify about the day that she finally left and the event of that day and what caused her to leave, she was 100% sure that had she gone back to that house with George and Jake, that they would have killed her. And Hannah knew the exact same thing. So when, anybody asks me, do I believe Tabitha? Yeah, I believe Tabitha mostly because of the private message exchange between Hannah and Tabitha, where they had no idea the events that were going to be taking place just a few short hours from when these messages were exchanged. So they have no reason to lie or to exaggerate or be dramatic. They said exactly what they felt, exactly what they thought.
Through Facebook Messenger, correct?
Yes.
And did anybody other than yourself have permission to access those messages?
No.
Okay. And you talked about if it was your house, you could do things the way you wanted. Was that different when you were in the Wagners' home?
Yes.
Okay. And was there specific comments about that, the house matter, basically?
Yes.
And when she's talking about the night you left, is that the night that you left and got and hid and got on your bicycle and never went back?
Yes.
Kenny, what's been marked as State's Exhibit EE11. That's a continuation. Okay. And if you can look at that, do you recognize that conversation?
Yes.
And is that a conversation that you had with Hannah Rhodens on April 21st, a continuation of the conversation that you were just reading to us?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and tell us what it said.
I said, yeah, I could only imagine. I mean, if George would have just let me go outside to cool off a bit, then we would probably still be married. All I wanted was 5 minutes to cry outside alone. I do understand Angela not giving me Vine to hug because you don't need them bad vibes and such, and I do thank you for taking him upstairs, but all I wanted was 5 minutes because I wasn't in a good mood because I was trying to clean the kitchen up, but Vine was awake and I was trying to get him back to sleep. Then she pulled up and seen I didn't get it cleaned up yet. Then George took her side and said that he never heard Vine crying, but George was outside working and Vine didn't cry. All loud was heard. It was just a little, hey, I'm alone kind of cry. Hannah said, yeah, that night was crazy. I said, then Angela told George he was gonna get the gun, so I walked past Jake and hid under the truck for a few, then snuck out and got my bike and went to the gas station to call my mom. Then y'all pulled up and Angela told him that I drug Vine around the house by his legs. Hannah said, I didn't know that she said that. I was stressed that night and no one really slept that night because he was gonna come with your mom down there and was waiting for it. And they was waiting for it.
And again, the they in that conversation is?
George, Jake, Billy, and Angela.
And is that a conversation that you had with Hannah Rhoden on April 21st of 2016 via Facebook?
Yes.
And did anybody else ever have your permission to view those messages?
No.
And is that the last conversation that you had with Hannah Rhoden?
Yes.
And Ms. Claytor, obviously, those conversations you and Hannah are talking about the experience of living with the Wagners, correct?
Yes.
And I guess the violence and the threats that both of you experienced there.
Yes.
And the controlling nature of the family.
Yes.
And also your efforts to see your son, correct?
Yes.
And Hannah's concerns regarding them also trying to take her daughter away from her, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned in there at some point that, again, and you testified about this previously, you had forced him to live apart from the rest of the family, so it would just be you and George together with your son. And you indicated George's response was that you're a farming family and you all have to live together.
Yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, did he ever move out of their home, or did he continue to live with them?
As far as I know, you to live with them.
And when you did get visits with your son, Bullvine, during the year of, I guess, 2016, part of 2015, I guess, would it be?
Yes.
Okay. And would other members of his family be present there?
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated basically in that last situation that George had said that he hadn't heard Bullvine crying, basically perhaps questioning whether or not Bullvine actually woke up, as you had described. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us if, when you had problems, various problems with George, would he usually take your side or the side of his mother?
He would always take his mother's side.
And once again, this goes back to the family dynamics that exist between Angela and George. You know, it is very, very clear from the evidence, in my opinion anyway, that Jake was and is Angela Wagner's favorite child. Okay. But she had no qualms about really pitting Jake and George against one another to win her love affection. They competed for it. George wanted his mother's approval. He did everything that she asked him to do, up to and including murder. And that's just facts. George is responsible for his actions, but it was not George's idea to murder the Rhoden family, nor did it benefit him to murder the Rhoden family. The only person that it benefited, and that is in air quotes because it's not a true benefit. This is the way their minds work. The only person that it would have been for Hannah Mae Rhoden to no longer be alive is Jake and Angela, not George. George, there was no benefit to him. He had no reason to want Hannah or the rest of the Rhoden family In fact, George and Hannah's brother, Frankie, were friends. And yet, George did it.
And I believe you indicated when you were riding your bike to the station, it was Jake and George who pulled up alongside of you.
Yes.
And then when you got to the station and they...
Sorry. Well, there are leading questions. I don't know if we're rehashing something she's already testified to or not. So, it was a leading question, so I'll sustain the objection to it.
Okay. And then when you got to the station, who was in they returned, who was all in that vehicle that time?
George, Jake, Billy, Angela, and Hannah.
Ms. Wagner, been talking, or Ms. Wagner, what was your former name? Sorry. We've been talking, Ms. Claytor, we have been talking a lot today about George, Jake, Angela, and Billy. First of all, do you recognize the person that you've described as George Wagner in the courtroom today?
Yes.
She can recognize her accent.
Sorry?
This is like she can recognize her accent.
I was also going to show...
Well, you're stipulating then that
I
the
accept
witness
the
here is
stipulation.
identifying the defendant as George Wagner.
That's correct.
Record shall so reflect and so advise.
I was also going to show a photo for the rest of the family. Do you want to see that too, or do you want me to have her identified?
Stipulation is the matter.
Specifically, Jake, Angela, and Billy.
Yes.
Thank you.
What was that?
I said particularly Jake, Angela, and Billy,
Words.
that she can identify them as well.
That's correct.
The jury so advise. And shall accept that stipulation as fact established by evidence here.
Okay. I have no other questions of this witness, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to get into the cross-examination. And while this is not 100% necessary to go into the family dynamics, it's like 85% necessary, because I remember some things coming out during the cross-exam that were not, that didn't come out on direct, that I do think are important. And like, you guys know how I am. I like to be fair. I like for you guys to hear both the direct and the cross-examination so that you can make your own determination. Just because it's my opinion that Angela Wagner is an absolute control freak monster doesn't mean that you guys have to feel the way. So I want you guys to have all the information and then make up your own opinion. You know? All right, here we go. So the defense is going to do cross-examination, and it's going to be a little rough. I'm warning you now. I know that I remember when I streamed this live, I was annoyed, irritated, and frustrated.
The defense may cross-examine.
Good afternoon, Ms. Clear.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Rick Nash. I'm going to ask you some questions. It's kind of based on the answers that you just gave yesterday and today, okay?
Okay.
If you need a moment to think about, or if I'm talking too fast, just let me know if you need to take a moment, okay?
Okay.
Or if you don't understand what I'm asking you, just let me know, because I want to make sure you understand, all right?
Okay.
All right. So the first thing I want to ask you about is when you testified today and yesterday regarding your meeting and living arrangements with the Wagners. You recall those questions, right?
Yes.
So let's go to when you were introduced to George. How were
I was around 11, 12 years old.
Okay. That meeting actually happened at the Flying W Farm, is that right?
Yes.
And do you recall that meeting being set up by Robin Wagner?
Yes.
And in fact, your mother had worked at Crystal Springs at that time, right?
Yes.
And that meeting was between you and George. Jake was there, and your sister Trish, is that right?
Yes.
And I believe would I be correct in that George and Trish were supposed to be introduced to each other, you and Jake, because of their similar ages, is that right?
Yes.
And the way things worked, it was just you and George that had an attraction, right?
Yes.
And I believe on that day you guys met I went fishing there at the big pond on the Flying W,
Yes,
and that's something you enjoy to do, is fish, right?
yes,
In fact, the boys rode their ATVs over to the Flying W farm. Do you recall that?
yes.
And that's
Okay. Now, we're 2.5 seconds into this shit and I'm already annoyed. I don't understand what the defense attorney is doing asking this question, okay? With respect to the arrangements, as it were, for the meeting. I don't know if you missed it. I might slow him down a little bit because he does speak at a faster pace and I don't want it to be too fast. So Robin Wagner is the one who set all of this up. Okay. And I forget right now how I feel like one of Frederica's daughters, or maybe daughter-in-law. Anywho, they all worked at the group home that Frederica Wagner ran, okay, including Tabitha's mother. And so the way that it was supposed to be is, I mean, they were essentially being matchmakers. And Tabitha is closer in age to Jake, and her sister is closer in age to George, and that's how it was supposed to be. It was, matchmaking, as it were. But obviously, things didn't work out that way. I don't understand what the defense hopes to gain from this questioning, because if anything, it actually doesn't make Tabitha or her mother look bad. It actually is, supported in how vulnerable Tabitha actually was to the Wagners. But please carry on, Mr. Attorney Man.
what you and George done later that day, ride ATVs or four-wheelers.
Yes,
And correct me if I'm wrong, but before you left that day, you and your sister, you guys had plans to meet again the following weekend and do this again, right?
yes.
And you were 11 years old at that time, right?
Around 11 or 12, yes.
And these meetings with George and Jake, these weekend meetings, they lasted maybe 2 or 3 weekends in a row. Does that sound about right? And after about 3 weekends, you and your sister stayed all night at the Wagner home.
Yes,
And that's the Wagner home there on Bethel Hill.
yes,
And that's that home that we had to follow that long driveway all the way to the top of the hill, right?
yes,
That's real close to Crystal Springs, right?
yes,
That's where your mother worked.
yes,
Yes, your mother's Tess, right?
yes,
Okay. And when you and your sister would stay overnight at the Wagner home, you stayed in Jake's room, is that right?
No, I stayed in Georgia's.
Okay. Do you recall initially staying in Jake's room with your sister?
I think first one of the nights.
Okay.
You see, this is where I'm going to get annoyed. Okay. At the day, Mr. Attorney Man, I don't know what you're hoping to prove here. 11-year-old as I don't know another word to use, but somehow provocative in some sort of way to do. And if you think that this somehow proves anything negative about Tabitha, you couldn't be further from the truth. Actually makes people feel bad for Tabitha, and in a small way, it also makes people feel maybe slightly bad for George and Jake, because it seems like the adults in these children's lives were pushing them to do things far too young, far too fast. And it doesn't speak to anybody, any of the adults in this situation being responsible for allowing minors, and at the age that they were. We're not talking about 16 and 17-year-old kids here, which I would have an issue with as well. But at the end of the day, there's a huge difference between a 16 and 17-year-old and an 11-year-old, okay, spending the night with their matchmaker to, maybe boyfriend, right? Because how can you have a boyfriend really at 11? Let's be real here, okay? So if anything, this makes the whole lot of the family, both families, look irresponsible and devoid of a moral compass, quite frankly.
Eventually, Trish stopped coming, or stopped going over to her home, and it was just you going, right?
Yes,
Because she had no interest in Jake, right?
yes,
You were interested in Jordan, so you would continue to go there to the Wagner home, right?
yes,
And eventually, you just stayed there, right?
yes,
Okay. And we spoke about school and where you went to school. And I understand you went to the vocational school, right?
yes,
But that was much later. That was when you would have been a late teen, right?
it was my 11th and 12th grade year.
Yeah. But before that, you were homeschooled.
Yes,
And Angela Wagner actually offered or did some of your homeschooling with you, right?
yes, I did some of my schoolwork as she was teaching the boys theirs.
Yeah. And in fact, you stayed at the Wagner home for about a year, right?
Yes,
Okay. And so could you tell us, when we asked when you moved in with the Wagners, actually when the prosecutor asked yesterday and today, you said you didn't move in until your senior year. Do you recall that answer?
yes,
But we are talking about you moving in when you're 11 years old. Could you explain to us why you didn't mention that yesterday and this morning?
because I didn't technically move in.
Okay.
I didn't change my address.
Okay, so it makes a difference if you hadn't changed your address as an 11-year-old, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay, listen, Mr. Defense Attorney man, she's 11, okay? Maybe to her mind, she's answering the question accurately because what started out as a overnight, there were probably not, times where she spent, after that multiple nights, but there were probably breaks in between where she didn't at the Wagner's home and instead went back to her home with her mother. So at 11 years old, you don't really have the you're too young to make the decision to move anywhere, quite frankly. So I think that what she's trying to differentiate is when she made the determination, when she decided that she was ready to live with George Wagner, not when she was just staying there as a kid. Stop playing semantics. Such a weak game, and it irritates I mean, I get that the law really is based on semantics, but when you're arguing semantics about testimony, as far as when somebody moved in, and you're talking about an 11-year-old, like, bruh, give me a break.
But nevertheless, you agree with me that you were living there at 11.
technically, yes.
Okay. In fact, you ended up moving a dresser into the home with your clothing, right?
A little plastic stand that had like 3 little drawers in it.
Yeah. And again, this is just on Bethel, right next to the Crystal Springs nursing home, right?
Yes.
And your mother still worked there.
Yes,
But your mother never came and picked you up, is that right?
no, yes, it is right.
Okay. Now, eventually, you ended up sleeping in the same bed with George.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
And you still would have been about 11 years old, right?
yes,
And
How is that, y'all? We're never going to get through this because I'm going to be pausing every 2 seconds to voice my outrage and irritation. This is, I understand that he has a job to do, okay? But what I don't understand is an experienced attorney thinking that this line of questioning is a good idea. See, at this point, Tabitha has not only come across to the jury as credible witness, but there's a manner of sympathy that the jury is probably feeling for her due to what she experienced. And then when the private messages between Hannah and Tabitha are read aloud in open court by Tabitha, which Hannah is agreeing, and they're both back and forth the same experience. It's not like Hannah's saying, that didn't happen. What are you talking about? Or Tabitha's telling Hannah, that didn't happen. What are you talking about? They're validating each other's feelings and they're validating each other's experiences through a conversation, which at the time they were having, neither one of them knew would substantiate anything. They had no motive for having this conversation other than to bond with each other, as it were. Hannah felt like she needed to apologize for some things. Tabitha needed to accept the apology and tell Hannah that she understood, and that's all there was to this conversation. There was no ulterior motive behind it. So for this defense attorney to think that this was a good idea to somehow put she's not 11 anymore, but she was at the time, and the jury can differentiate between the 11-year-old girl back in the when this happened during the time of the events that he's discussing and questioning her about, and the mature woman who is sitting here in court testifying today. It makes you look like an ass, bruh. And all it's doing is making the jury realize, throw it off, and up the Wagner family is to even have allowed this. Yes, her mother is messed up for allowing it as well. But again, it's not like Angela took Tabitha into her home because she wanted to help Tabitha's mother out, in which case Tabitha likely either would not have slept in any room with either one of the boys, frankly. This was something else that Angela was on board and a part of, a party to.
Yesterday, you talked about Angela Wagner having this conversation and saying something about you shouldn't have sex unless you have a baby, or sex is only for babies. You remember saying that, right?
Yes.
So are you saying that conversation happened when you were 11 or 12 years old, sleeping in Georgia's bed?
No, we had that conversation whenever we started dating again as older teens.
Okay, all right. So just so we all understand what you're saying, that Angela never said anything about premarital sex or sex at all until you were late teens, right?
Yes.
And never said anything about sex until you were still sleeping in Georgia's bed as an 11 or 12-year-old, right?
Yes.
Okay.
How does that help your client? How does that take away from Tabitha's credibility? Oh, that's right. It doesn't.
If my calculation is correct, at 11 years old, that would have been about 2003 for you. Is that right?
I'm horrible with math, but it sounds about right.
Okay. And then in 2004, you moved your belongings, or you were no longer staying in the Wagner home, right?
Yes.
And that's when he broke up with you.
Yes.
You guys attended a church, and there was a girl there that he had an eye for, right?
I suppose he just told me he didn't want to be a boyfriend anymore.
Okay. And that's when you started staying with your mother, Ted.
Yes.
But during that year, that you between 11 and 12, when you were dating George, you would sometimes go home, right?
Yes.
And then freely just come back to the home, right?
Yes.
So we heard some testimony about you not being able to leave, and maybe it's just me, but it sounded like you didn't want to be there. But yet you freely came back at that young age, right?
As a child, yes.
Okay.
Let me just stop you right there. With your, lame Dr. Emmett Brown quote, if my calculation is correct, let me tell you about my calculations. If my calculations are correct, Angela Wagner didn't start exerting her control on Tabitha until George and Tabitha got back together as older teens, and after they were married, when they would have been, which is when these other conversations took place. For example, why don't you ask her when she was 11 or 12 if Angela had chores and rules where she was made to clean? I mean, a kid at 11 or 12 years old who's not being controlled and manipulated and abused and terrorized will probably freely come back to a home. Okay? It's much different when you're 16, 17, 18 years old and you're trying to see your family and your mother-in-law won't allow it. Stop playing with these people out here, Mr. Attorney Man.
So then in 2004, when you had to move out of the Wagner home because George broke up with you, you ended up getting back with George about a year later. Is that right?
No, there was like 6 years in between us dating when we were little kids compared to when we were older.
Okay, you're certain you did not make another move back into the Wagner home?
I didn't move in. I think we had dated for maybe like a week or two.
Okay.
And I spent 1 or 2 nights there.
Okay. And then it would be about, you talked about going to the vocational school. At that time, you were actually enrolled in a local school district, right?
Yes,
Which would have been Northwest District.
yes,
And you were taking vocational courses at the VOTEC in Lucasville, is that right?
yes,
All right. But about that time, right before your senior year, that's when you and George got back together, right?
yes,
In fact, you guys had taken a trip to Florida in July of 2011. Does that sound right?
yes,
And he proposed to you on that trip to Florida.
yes,
And you said yes.
yes.
Okay. After you graduated in May, but
All right. I got to stop it right here because obviously I have to pause for commentary because this is not court TV. This is Law and Crimes. I'm going to tell you guys right now, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. The way, the road and the path that the defense attorney is going down right now is not fixing to get better. It's actually going to get worse. And what's setting them up shortly is circumstances under which she got pregnant and her son's the questions regarding her maternity. Okay, at the time when she was pregnant, not now, or as the trial is taking place. But this is going to be a bumpy road. It's not going to be an enjoyable road. It's going to be a completely irritating and maddening road. I'm just telling you that right now to give you a spoiler alert. All right, now continue.
it would have been in the year of 2012. You had a graduation party, right?
Yes,
And George went to your house
yes,
where the graduation party was being held, right?
yes,
Okay, so, and while we're on the subject of George coming to your house, that time, when you guys were together, he would go to your house for holidays, right? Or visit your mothers or your family?
no,
Okay. Well, you two eventually wed in July of 2012.
yes,
Okay, and that was wedding there at the Mission, I believe. Is that right, by the Crystal Springs?
yes,
All right. And was that your decision to get married?
yes,
All right. And because you love George, this is who you wanted to be with, right?
yes,
And you had spent a lot of time with him.
yes,
Okay. You were under no compulsion to agree to marry him. You were free to say no, right?
yes,
Okay. And after you guys got married, you moved back into the Wagner home, right?
no, I had moved back in before we got married.
Okay, that's right, during your senior year, right?
Yes,
And at that time, you didn't have a car,
no,
and George would take you every morning to school.
he would drive me down to the end of, I can't remember the name of the road, where the bus could pick me up.
Okay. And while you were at school, George had some issues because you were then seeing another guy at the school. Is that right?
Yes,
All right. And George found that,
yes,
and he worked with you,
yes,
and you guys moved forward and got married, right?
yes,
After this marriage, you were free to leave the Wagner home, right?
for a little while.
Yeah. And when you were free to leave, because I heard some testimony yesterday and today that made it sound like you weren't.
I was free to leave for a little while.
Okay. And in fact, you know you were free to leave because you, after you were married, you were visiting your best friend.
Yes,
Whitney is her name, is that right?
yes,
And you would go to Whitney's house
yes.
and even stay all night there?
During school, yes, I stopped once I graduated.
And George was okay with that, right?
Yes.
In fact, nobody was telling you you can't go to Whitney's, nobody was telling you you can't leave, right?
They didn't like the idea, but I did it anyways.
You did it anyways because you have that ability and right, right?
Yes,
Okay. But there was a particular you liked going to Whitney's a lot, right?
she was my best friend, yes.
Yeah, was there anything else there?
Not at the time.
Okay. Well, so you said not at the time. You're very particular, which leads me to ask, was there a time that you wanted to go there more often than just seeing Whitney?
No,
And who's Whitney's father?
yes.
And who is her father?
Cecil,
Cecil Smith. And how do you know, how well do you know Cecil Smith?
very well.
Okay. And Cecil also goes by the name Jake, is that right?
Yes,
Okay. And at some point, you had some revelation to tell George about Jay, right?
yes.
And what was that?
What was the reason?
Well, yeah, what was the revelation? What did you have to tell him?
I had told him that I was doing
Okay,
with Jay.
right. And in fact, this was more than just one occasion, right?
Yes,
And how old is Jay?
25, 30 years older than me.
You were about 17 maybe at the time?
No, I didn't get back with George until I was about 18. 19.
Okay, so then you would have been about 18, 19. And tell me again, how much older was he than you?
About 25, 30 years older.
It's fair to say that you had very strong feelings for Jay, right?
Yes, I did.
Now, there was a reason that you had to tell George that you had been having sex.
I'm going to object to this line of questioning. I don't see what I'm saying.
Open the door on this topic.
Please approach. Yes.
I just want to say before they get back that I appreciate you guys hanging in there. My Wi-Fi is really bad. I need to get that Wi-Fi whenever when we get paid through YouTube again. But this line of questioning is ridiculous. It has zero to do with what is actually of the situation. The only thing that he's doing is trying to make it look bad in front of the jury, and it's ridiculous. It's not gonna work out well for him, because I think that she's already got a level of sympathy from the jury and empathy from the jury, and because what this defense attorney isn't keeping in mind is that Tabitha has already testified that, that she was, excuse me again, this dadgum coffee. I'm so sorry. So rude. That she was essayed as a child by somebody in the family, somehow connected to the family. Didn't really go into specifics, and I'm not going to go into it either. I'm not trying to remember because it really serves no purpose. It just with Tabitha, and understand it's likely that even though she would have been of age to consent, she was 18 years old. The fact of the matter is that the age gap between Tabitha and this other gentleman, and I use that very loosely, this other male, I should say, um, such that she's really not in a position to know what she's doing, the long-term consequences or ramifications from this behavior, or really to establish any type of boundary because of what happened to her and because so I don't understand why I do understand what they're attempting to do. I just think it's ridiculous and disgusting.
All right, so you may continue your question.
Thank you, Judge.
I can't judge aloud this either.
Despite these problems that
Exactly.
you had brought in marriage, George was willing to work with you on that, right?
Yes.
And here's the deal. Also, earlier in his line of questioning, when he was asking about whether she was free to go and whatnot, right? The way that he was phrasing the questions, the words that he was using, it came across to me as if he were saying, well, listen, you would have been free to leave if you hadn't cheated. As if reaching somebody's ability to see their own family is justified. She cheated.
And
Ridiculous.
although he was willing to work with you, and you gave him your word that you would stop this behavior, right?
Yes.
But you didn't do it. You continued
Yes.
this affair.
No.
Okay. So your son, he was born in July of 2013, right?
Yes.
Do you recall a trip that was in May of 2013 in Dundee, Michigan?
What year?
2013, May? Do you recall a call from your doctor?
Yes.
Okay. And you had a conversation, you picked up the phone, you spoke with the doctor, right?
Yes.
And as a result of that conversation, you had a discussion with George about your infidelity, right?
That's actually whenever he found out.
Okay, all right,
He didn't find out until after the phone call.
okay. And going into
Hey, Irene, good to
giving
see
birth to your son, you and George were having issues about your marriage based on your infidelity, right?
Somewhat.
And you had questions about whether he was actually the father of this child.
Yes.
And you would agree with me that after this, George is going to have some concerns about you and your faithfulness to him, right?
Yes.
And you
Hey,
wanted to
Adrian,
continue
good
this
to see you.
relationship.
Yes.
It was an opportunity for you to walk out if you no longer wanted to be with George, right? Because he was actually saying that this relationship is over at that point, but you wanted it to continue. Right?
Yes.
In fact, it's you and your efforts to continue this relationship gave George your cell phone, any passwords you had to social media, in a way to ease his mind that you would no longer cheat on him, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you were asked a lot of questions. You gave your password to anybody, and you said no to all those questions. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Did you forget about that?
No, I did not.
You didn't tell us when you were asked whether you gave any passwords to anybody.
Because it's
I'm sorry, it's what?
it was a different Facebook account.
A different Facebook account.
When I left him, I made a new one.
Okay. And in fact, when we talk about different Facebook accounts, you were given, looked like screenshots of a Facebook account you said you did not create, right?
Yes.
But you have created Facebook accounts with your picture, but a different name, right?
Different maiden name, or different
Okay.
last name, yes.
However, create a Facebook account under the name of Jane Deere?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I just asked if you had, and you said yes, but with a different last name. You just said that, right?
Yes.
Did you just forget about Jane Deere? Or if I would ask you about that.
I actually did forget about that one.
Okay. Now, there was some testimony about when you gave birth to Bullvine, about how your family wasn't there, right?
Yes.
In fact, from what I know, your family wasn't there a lot of times. They didn't visit you on Bethel, right?
They weren't allowed.
So Remember, I asked you whether you went home back and forth, and you said yes, right?
When I was yes.
Okay, all right. So you're saying that stopped as you got older?
Yes.
Okay. After giving birth to, mother did not like George. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Hold on a minute.
And would it?
All right, so let's pack this line of questioning that's ridiculous. So, Mr. Defense Attorney, what are you suggesting here? Because at one time, Tabitha gave George access to one Facebook account that she had created. That means that he had access to any Facebook account in perpetuity till the end of time, so that if she created another Facebook account, because he'd had permission to be in one Facebook account, that he had permission to be in every Facebook account. Also, by extension, could create her Facebook's account, could create other Facebook accounts in her name, or allow his mother to give his mother permission to create other Facebook accounts. Trying to say here, does that make any kind of sense in your brain? Because it makes zero sense in mine. Ridiculous.
Tell me about any conversations you were heard or part of that had the idea of bringing another male to the delivery room to have his name put on the birth certificate. Do you recall that?
No.
Okay. So if your mother said that happened, or if she had messaged on Facebook, you're totally unaware of that, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at some point, you got the idea that George was keeping you from your mother and your sisters, is that right?
Yes.
And we spoke just a little bit ago about Cecil. Isn't it true that when you, well, before I go there, one of the things you like to do is go fishing, is that right?
Yes.
And you would go with your mother sometimes, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so I just saw you look up. You know where I'm going with these questions?
Yes, I do.
And does this deal with a fishing trip you and your mother took to Lake White?
Yes, it does.
Yours, what I'm about to ask you?
Your Honor,
Correct.
I object to this style
Okay.
of badgering, frankly.
All right. So your mother told George you were going fishing at Lake White, is that right?
Yes.
And I believe George was going somewhere else and he asked you to go along and you declined, right?
Yes.
And it was during that trip that you were with your mother, the other visit with Cecil, right?
Yes, but my mother didn't know about it. That was not my plans that day. My plans were to go fishing with my
Okay. And so while you say your mother didn't part in it, your mother, though, was aware and enabled you to George.
No.
So you're telling us that your mother was unaware of your relationship with Jake.
Yes.
Let me just stop you right there, Mr. Defense Attorney man. At the end of the day, I think it's clear that the adults in Tabitha's life, which include the Wagner family, didn't really have her best interest at heart, right? I mean, setting up your daughters at 11 and 12, 13 years old, whatever Tabitha's old age was, they don't really talk about that because she doesn't really have anything to do with that. But the bottom line is, matchmaking your 11-year-old daughter, I think anybody would agree, is probably irresponsible parenting. It's not a good parenting plan. Okay, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Especially given the fact that we're talking about 2003, not 1943 or even 1953. Okay, so it's ridiculous. And actually, I know you're trying very, very hard to discredit Tabitha, but you're blaming an 11-year-old for decisions that she had no part in making, because she's again 11 years old, and 11-year-olds do what the adults in their lives tell them to do, which she did.
And she never set this up or arranged for you two to be together? No?
No.
Okay. And speaking of your mother, you testified a little bit about the unfortunate occasion that you're a victim of sexual abuse, right?
Yes.
And that would have been before a very small child, less than 11, right?
Yes.
Prior to moving into the Wagner home.
Yes.
And the perpetrator, the person who victimized you, that's Dave, right?
Yes.
Dave is your mother's husband.
Was. He's dead now.
He's dead. And when did he die?
5 years ago, I think.
Okay. And your mother was aware of the things that Dave did to you, right?
Yes.
And not only did he do these awful things to you, but he did them to your sisters.
Yes.
In fact, the state had given you some Facebook messages you had with Hannah where you discussed George bringing this up and asking you about this or giving you problems about this, right?
Yes.
And so there was a time, actually, that that's Travis Turner. Do you know who Travis Turner is?
Your Honor, I'm going to object if we. I'm going to object to this line of questioning.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll withdraw that question. And was there an occasion where you and George and the rest of your family met with your mother at your sister Renee's to discuss Dave?
Yes.
And was there an individual there by the name of Travis Turner?
I think. I'm not sure if he was there or not.
Okay. Would you agree with me that the purpose of this meeting was to do something about Dave, to turn him into law enforcement?
Yes.
And had that happened, your mother may get in trouble as well.
Yes.
And your mother did not want anybody to tell on Dave, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and George is there. He's present for all this conversation, right?
Yes.
Now, when you went back in your home, and we'll get to this more in depth.
Hold on a minute.
That's where you went.
Again, Mr. Defense Attorney, I ask you, what is the point to all of this? Okay. At the end of the day, even if, like most human beings, the majority of human beings, right? They're not one thing all of the time. So if George committed a monstrous, heinous act in participating in the murder of 8 people, right? That doesn't mean that he was a monster 25-8. I think that it goes without, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, but good people do bad things and bad people do good things. Okay. So I don't know. I think that what you're trying to establish here is that her home was some sort of like she was a refugee from fleeing from one abuse, right? And sadly, she fled from one abusive situation into another. Granted, there are different types of abuse, but abuse is still abuse all the same. Wouldn't you agree, defense attorney? Ridiculous. This is utter poppycock. And I remember I was so angry. I feel the same way of watching it back as I did the time when I watched it initially.
Was the home with Dave, right?
Yes.
And George did not want his little boy in the same home as Dave. Is that what he told you?
Yes.
Okay.
And for the record, Mr. Defense Attorney, at no point did Tabitha ever say that she wanted her son to be living in that home with where Dave resided. In fact, if I remember correctly, what her testimony actually was, is that she agreed that her son would be better staying with George until she was able to get on her feet and get her own place. So this didn't work out well for you either, because it seems like you're trying to make out George to only exerting enough control in that he worked to prevent something from happening to his own son. So it wasn't actually control. It was protection of their son. No, it was control. Stop playing with these people.
That seems like a pretty rational thing to not want your child around a child molester, right?
Yes.
You don't fault George for not wanting his son to be there, right?
What is it?
You don't fault him for not wanting his son to be there in that home.
Well,
That was a no?
yes, that was a no. I don't blame him.
Your mother was an enabler to the thing that happened to you and your sisters.
Yes.
It's a criminal and part of it, right?
Yes.
And just like George didn't want his child to be around Dave, he wasn't comfortable about his child being around your mother either, right?
Yes.
And you talked about how the Wagners didn't like your family. You said that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think the argument here, Counselor, is that the Wagners weren't justifying some of their feelings towards her family. It's the fact that they wouldn't let her see her family. She's an adult. She should be able to see who she wants. It's still her mother. Regardless of all of that, at the end of the day, it would be Tabitha's choice whether or not she has a relationship with her mother. And the Wagners, George included, your client, were part of keeping her from exercising her own free will. Now, I can understand them objecting and not allowing the child to be around her mother, because by extension, that puts the child around her stepfather. So I understand, but not her herself.
All right. And
Good morning,
so
Brown.
back to after you and George, George had given the relationship, agreed to the relationship another shot, you guys lived together there in the Wagner home, right?
Yes.
Now, there was an occasion where, and I'm not sure what happened, but maybe you can tell us, that George had found you in the bathroom and you were cutting your wrists. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And George had taken you out of the bathroom and was going to take you to the hospital. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do, but that's not where he wanted to head to.
I'm sorry?
That's not where he said he was going.
Oh, well, didn't George ask you at that time or suggest that the two of you should leave and go to Alaska?
No.
You don't recall that?
No, he wanted to send me off to Tennessee with my sister.
Okay, all right. Well, do you recall telling George that it wouldn't be good for Bullvine for us to leave?
He suggested even leaving.
Okay. And so you ended up going back to the house, right?
Yes, because Angela found us and made us.
I'm sorry. what-
Yes, because Angela caught up with us when we were still on the driveway and had us go back home.
When we talked about,
Well, I'm going to stop you right there, Mr. Defense Attorney. But I believe the testimony has been throughout this whole situation, the entirety, with respect to George and Tabitha. I believe what Tabitha has testified to is she really believes a lot of the reason that she and George didn't work out is because of Angela and Angela's control and George's unwillingness to live separately from his family. That she felt that if she and George and their son were able to have their own away from Angela, Billy, and Jake Wagner, that perhaps they could have made it work. So I don't get your point.
George's concerns about you or not taking his child home of where your mother and Dave live. You had talked about, some distrust. I think that you said George had for you, which prevented you from leaving or having some forms of communication, such as through Facebook, right? That was difficult for you.
Without a phone, yes.
Yeah. And In fact, it's because you told him, or you will admit, that you cannot be faithful,
I couldn't, no.
which is the reason these restrictions were there, right?
Yes.
In fact, you had told George, well, before I get to that, you would agree with me that on 3 or 4 occasions, you had been visited by BCI agents and they talked to you, right?
Yes.
Were you aware that your conversation was recorded?
Yes.
Okay. And there was some discussion about communication you had with your mother, and you had asked George if you could use his cell phone to your mother. Do you remember that?
Yes.
But George was at work, all right?
Possibly so.
And I believe, would you agree with me that when George got home, that you had just forgot to call your mother, right?
He wasn't going to let me anyways.
But you just testified that you called him and you asked if you could, and he said, yeah, right?
I did not call them. I was not allowed to be on a phone.
Okay, but you had asked him if you could call your mother on his cell phone, is that right?
Yes.
All right, but then you later forgot to follow up and do that. That's what you told the BCI agent, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we've heard for the last 2 days, you've said about your experience of being married to George.
Me too,
and-
Rachel.
And
It
living
does
in
remind me of
Wagner
prior.
home. But didn't you say that you had a wonderful relationship with your husband, George?
For the first part of it, yes, I did.
All right, now, you're telling us that there was an exception. There was some point that this work relationship was not wonderful?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we talked about your Facebook messages that you had with Hannah. Do you remember having conversation with David Jenkins?
Yes.
Your Honor. I'm going to object to any of this
Okay, grounds?
hearsay. I have no idea.
She's on the Facebook messages.
Your Honor,
The hearsay.
we can affect on this.
Oh, this had to be incredibly hard for her. I can't even imagine. What happened here? Hold on. Why is there no sound? I don't know why is there sound for you guys or is it just me? No, this is intentional because I can hear the thing in the background. So this is, I can't remember what happened here. Why?
According to your testimony then,
Hold
that
on.
at that time when you were able to go,
On the arm. Oh, maybe
Okay.
an
George had put his,
to me with the.
and it was Olaf.
All right, let's see. Maybe they just forgot to unmute.
I'm going to show you.
All right, sorry about that, y'all.
So I'm going to show you what this document here. If you look at the top highlighted portion, first off, do you recognize what that document is?
Well, yeah, I know that they would mute for the sidebar, but when I found it, he's asking her questions and she's answering, and I think that the camera operator forgot to unmute is the problem. But yes, I think that I do think she's doing really well. I remember thinking how strong she was during this part. No, what? Well, yeah, it's fixed. So here we go. Let's see what else is going on.
Yes.
All right. Now, go ahead, take a moment, look over, and if you want, get it back to me, put it down, and I'll ask you again. All right, can I have it? Were you able to read that document?
Yes.
All right. Now, you agree, Sam? conversation from somebody by the name of Tabby Breach?
That was me.
So now that I have refreshed your recollection, do you recall telling David Jenkins you had a perfect life with your husband?
Yes.
And who you're referring to is George, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe she felt that at the time. I
That-
mean, look, here's the deal. When you don't come from the most stable environments and you don't really have a good role model or pattern for what healthy relationships look like, you might think in the moment that what you have with somebody is a perfect relationship until it isn't, until you mature a little and are allowed to see the outside world and how other relationships are. Then you might reflect and say, maybe mine isn't so great. I don't know what this proves either.
Back to George and living with him, he had various jobs, right?
Yes.
For a while, he worked at Bennett's in Medford.
Yes.
Okay. And then for some time, he was hauling cattle, right? And when he would haul cattle, he would be gone for like a week on or a week off, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, what's the point? He should work. He had a family to support. And he didn't want her working. So
Back to
somebody's
that
got to make money.
Situation where you had cut your arm. Did you ever seek any help for that?
The only reason I done it was because George and Angela wouldn't shut up and leave me alone about getting back on Zoloft, even though I told them the last time I was on Zoloft, it didn't end well.
Zoloft. Okay. So you have been prescribed Zoloft, is what you're telling us.
Yes.
And for what reason are you prescribed Zoloft?
For depression, bipolar.
Okay. And you have said, you would agree with me that you've said that you don't like taking your medication, right?
Not that one, no.
Okay. Any other medication you didn't like taking?
Legally, no.
Okay. So have you been taking your medication lately?
Lately?
Yes.
What does that matter?
Well, she's testifying here. Have you been taking your...
Yes.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, even if she wasn't taking her medication, she didn't kill anybody. She's not the one on trial. And I don't see how, I understand that he's trying to, chip away at her credibility here, right? As if having a mental health issue or being bipolar or being depressed makes you less credible. Shut up, man.
I'm going to ask you about that incident when you had left the Wagner home. If I'm not mistaken, well, first off, you have discussed that incident with the BCI agents, right?
About me leaving or about me cutting my arm?
About the incident when you left. You've
Yeah.
been questioned about that, and you told them what happened, right?
Yes.
Hey, fair,
You
good
agree
to
with
see
me, though,
you.
that when you talked to the BCI agents, you told them that you and George were horseplaying around.
With the belt, yes.
Okay, and it's my fault, I don't hear that well. You said what now?
With the belt, yes.
With the belt, but, okay, now you would agree with me that you never told any BCI agent that there was playing with a belt, right?
What?
You never mentioned a belt to a BCI agent, right?
It's part of that night, I'm pretty sure I did.
Okay, all right. But you've always said that it was just the two of you horseplaying or playing around. Right?
Yes, at first it was.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood your testimony on direct examination, but it sounded to me that you were saying that he was like assaulting you with a belt. That's not true, right?
That's not what I said.
And I may be wrong, but I'm just making sure I understood you correctly.
I understood her correctly. It's never what she said. What in the actual F are you doing here?
You weren't testifying that he was assaulting you with a belt, right?
No, I did not say he was assaulting me with a belt.
Okay, and it was just guys were playing around, right?
In the beginning,
Aw,
yes.
thank you
Okay.
so much,
And then
Griffey Bear. I
Angela,
appreciate that,
I
babe.
guess, wanted you guys to stop.
Yes, because I yelled at her precious baby.
Okay. And you wanted to leave the house, right?
Yes.
And when you went to leave, George put his arm on the door so you couldn't leave, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this was in November, you would agree with me, right?
Yes.
Okay. And when you left on your bicycle, it was dark, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so how much time went by from when you were trying to leave and when you actually fled on your bicycle?
It was dark. I don't know. Maybe
Okay.
an hour.
Okay. So again, it's November, it's dark, and George is trying to keep you from leaving the house. That's what I understand, right?
OMG.
And when he had his
Sir, I cannot even, totally forgot about this part. Are you really trying to suggest that George was preventing her from, she didn't actually want to leave the residence in, like, go down the road. She made it very clear. She just wanted to go stand on the porch and have a moment. She didn't want to flee. She wasn't trying to leave. What you're suggesting here is that George prevented her from leaving because he was trying to keep her safe because it was dark. Stop it. It's too dark to stand on the porch and cry. Get out of here, bruh.
arm on the door trying to keep you from leaving the house, that's when I think you said you bit him,
Yes, on the arm.
and then you did something else.
Try to rip his nuts off.
Okay, all right. And so he eventually, I guess, released his arm and you were able to go outside.
Yes.
And your testimony was you just wanted to be left alone.
Yes, because I was aggravated and I needed to cry and get over it.
Okay. Now, at that time, were you still taking your meds?
No, I wasn't on medicine at that time.
Okay. All right.
Are-
Now, I believe, according to your testimony, then that Angela had said, "Give me a gun, or I'm going to get a gun." Is that right?
Yes, she told me.
Are you suggesting, sir, that the reason that she reacted in the way that she did is because she wasn't on her medication? Are you suggesting that if she'd been taking her Zoloft, she would not have regarded George keeping her from leaving the bedroom as a threat? And none of this would have happened if she were on her Zoloft. Is that what you're suggesting, sir? Do you even know how things like this work? Give me a break. Zoloft is a mood stabilizer. It doesn't, ugh, and even I'm just over him already.
George said she was going to get a gun.
Okay. And who all was around when that happened?
Well, it was me in the middle of the yard. There was George and Angela on the porch, and Jake was outside fixing his truck.
Okay. And there was Vine, that's your son. He was there, right?
Yes,
And Hannah was there.
yes,
And it's fair to say you were very upset, right?
yes.
You're crying.
Of
right?
course, yes.
And some discussion about your state of mind and you shouldn't be holding Vine, or somebody wanted to take Vine from you. Is that right?
Yes, Angela wanted to take him from me. She handed him to Hannah and told them to go upstairs with him.
Okay, all right. You ended up, we heard you went underneath the truck and then you grabbed your bike and you took off, right?
Yes,
Okay. Now, you testified to this threat Angela made with a gun, right?
yes,
And that I believe you testified that George had struck you, right?
before all of that other stuff happened, yes, before I bit him and all of that.
Oh, wait, you're saying that he struck you before you bit him?
Yes,
Okay, all right. And would you have told me, the BCI agents, that after you went outside and he went outside, that he then hit you? Would you have told BCI agents that?
yes. That's
Okay.
part of what happened that night.
Okay, so it was you biting him and hitting him before you say he hit you, right?
No, we went outside. I went outside to try to cool off. He came out following.
Okay,
He told me to stop yelling. My smart-ass mouth decides to yell louder. So he slaps me. I tell him that he signed the papers. I go back inside and I get my shoes on. I try to go back outside, but that's whenever he decided to trap me in there with his arm.
okay, all right. Well, you know that that's illegal. You shouldn't be assaulting people, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't be threatening people with a gun either, right?
Yeah.
And so when you got to the gas station and that cell phone, at what point were you going to call the police?
I wasn't.
Okay, you weren't, but yet a Adams County deputy had shown up there, right?
Yes.
And at Adams County Betty had shown up, you ended up getting charged, right?
Yes,
Okay. And fight about being seated in the back of a cruiser. Right?
yes.
In fact, you were then taken to the Adams County where you
No.
were released. You were not taken to
No.
the Adams County Sheriff's Department?
No.
Okay. You were charged though, right then?
The cop had me sign some sort of ticket.
You were given a ticket. Now, after would you agree with me that you went to the Wagner home and left a note in the mailbox for George?
A couple days later, yes.
And the content of that note was that Bullvine could stay with him because you didn't have a place for him, right?
Temporarily, yes.
Okay, you put that in the note temporarily?
Honestly, I don't know what I wrote. That was a lot of years ago.
Okay, but you do remember reading the note, right?
Yes.
Okay, now, from what we've all heard here, you make it sound like you were the victim, right?
Well, I'm not trying to be a big crybaby, but yeah.
Okay, all right. And so that paper, that summons that you had sent you into the Adams County Court, right?
I have no idea what it did.
Do you recall the Adams County Court?
I know after a week or so, maybe a couple days, George had given me the money to pay whatever that fine was, but then he also said that he dropped it.
Yeah, let's not gloss over that so fast. You're aware of the Adams County Courthouse, right?
Yes.
And a judge, you saw a judge, similar to the judge we've had here with a robe on, right?
During our divorce?
Okay, but you went to the courthouse and you pled guilty, right?
No.
You did not plead?
No.
Okay.
Oh, you better have your seats, buddy.
So to your knowledge, whatever happened to that charge?
He said he dropped it. So you can ask him what happened to it.
Well, I heard you say something about paying money. Right?
Yes, it was his fault it happened. He paid for it. He gave me the money to pay for
Paid
it.
for what though?
Oh, if I know.
I'm sorry?
I do not know.
And who was it that told you that you were owed?
George?
And so at no time are you telling all of us that you ever had a conversation with a court official telling you that you had a fine?
Other than the domestic violence fine that I was paid on, he said he dropped.
Okay, and so but I just want to make sure that what you're telling us is that
What she's telling you is that George is a lying liar mouth who tells lies, because there would be no fine if he had dropped the charges. So that's what she's testifying to, okay? And we're all picking up what she's putting down, and it doesn't matter how many times you ask her and how many different ways you ask her, it's coming across exactly like George lied to her. He told her that he dropped the charges and then turned around for money for a fine. You don't have fines if the charges are dropped. We're all picking up, and I think the jury is picking up what she's putting down. I don't know what you need to try some other way or some other manner or approach, because you're coming across looking like a jerk and she's coming across looking sympathetic.
whatever happened to this case, you're unaware and all you know is George told you it was dropped, but for some reason you owed fine, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell me, for what reason would you have a fine if the case was dismissed?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
You never asked about that?
No, I'm a blonde.
Okay. I'm sorry, what was
I
that?
said, no, I'm a blonde.
Okay.
No, I haven't. I'll have to check that out. Hash Brown.
But do you even remember going to the courthouse?
No, this has been asked and answered.
I had went to some building that George had dropped off at and told me to pay a fine of some sort.
Okay.
What building it was, I don't know.
Yes, okay. Were you on your medication at that?
Oh my Jesus.
No, I wasn't on any medication at that time.
What does that have to do with anything?
Despite what had happened out on Peterson or what was alleged, you're telling us that George is the one who actually took you to court, right?
No. My sister drove me there or around there,
Okay.
and she didn't know exactly where I was supposed to go. So we met up with him, and me and George had driven to whatever building we drove to.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand this. Your sister drove you so far, and then you're saying you and George drove another portion. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe because
And
George,
so,
let me just pause right here. Maybe because George was like 6 years older than her, okay, and had a little more experience with the courthouse and dealing with criminal fines and repercussions because of the criminal behavior of his entire family going back generations, sir.
speaking of these legal proceedings, you had told us that you were in a courtroom at the time of the divorce, right?
Yes, that's where you go to get divorced.
Yes. And so back to your statement that you told George that he just signed his own divorce paperwork, or he just signed his divorce. You remember saying that, right? George is actually the one who filed for divorce.
Yes.
Okay. And you had met with George at his attorney's office.
Yes.
And your mother, and at this time, just so we're clear, your legal standing is, you guys have a child in common, right?
Yes.
Of this marriage, right?
Yes.
And so you're at this attorney's office, and you are told then that you would not have custody, right?
Yes, but it was supposed to be temporary.
Okay. And not only were you told that you would not have custody, but you were told that all visits would be soothed, right?
They weren't supposed to be, yes.
Okay. And for what reason would you agree to that?
I don't know. Because I'm not the smartest person in the world.
Well, at that time in your life, would it have been more convenient for you have, if you're with another person, that you not have a child in your life at that time?
Oh my God.
But let me ask you, you and your mother had a conversation, you agree with me, about Jay, right?
Yeah.
And you were talking to your mother about you being in love with Jay, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And would you agree with me that your mother told you you need to make Bullvine a priority and forget about Jay? Would you agree with me on that?
Sounds about like something my mother would say, yes.
Okay. And you agree with me that your mother said it's not fair to Vine and that you spend your money that you saved on Jay?
What money?
You don't agree with that?
No.
Okay. Do you recall your mother, Patricia Tess Howard, telling you, I'm not trying to be mean or cruel, but what you need to do is stop worrying about Jay and get your shit together for your son? Remember your mother telling you that?
Sounds like her, yes.
Okay. Do you recall your mother telling you he's your first priority or should
Sounds like her, yes.
stop using Jay as a crutch? Remember that?
Not particularly.
Okay. So it sounds to me that your mother is telling you, make your son a priority. Forget about Jay, right?
Yeah.
So I ask you, why do you agree to supervise visits or to not being the custodian of your son? Why would you not fight for that?
Because I had no job and nowhere to live.
Okay.
He also probably didn't understand what it was that she was agreeing to and what all of those different terms meant in the real world. Okay. So she wasn't represented. So while attorneys cannot lie, right? When they're it's up to she's the attorney for George who's explaining all of this to Tabitha isn't going to freely offer up explanations that are not asked for. So if Tabitha motioned as if she understood what was on and signed off on it and agreed to it, but never asked any follow-up questions, then George's divorce attorney would be under no obligation to explain to her what the various terms and things that she was signing off on meant. And you know this as an attorney.
In fact, I believe you had told BCI agents that where you did have to not be safe for your son, right?
Yes, that was with my mother.
Okay. But you told the agents that it was because there were a bunch of radio parts around the home.
Yeah, the home was very cluttered.
And it's the home where Dave lives, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess it's his CD radio parts?
Yes.
Okay. And you also told BCI agents that Bullfine was safe where he was with his father.
Yes, he was a lot safer there than he was at my house.
Okay.
I mean, if you're talking about, look, when about physical safety, yes, her son would have been physically safe with his father. Her son been physically safe with Angela. All right. Physical safety is not the only type of safety there is. You see what kind of mother Angela Wagner is. Look at the sons that she raised and look at what they're capable of doing. So while her son may have been physically safe, he wasn't emotionally or morally safe in that house. That's huge. And the fact that Tabitha recognized that he would have been physically safe in George's house versus at her with her actually is a testament to a good mother. A good mother does what's best for her child, regardless of how that makes her feel. So as much as she missed her child, as much as she ached for him to be with her full time, she knew the better place for him would have been with George. That's what's called a sacrifice. And that's what you do as a parent. Cole.
Now, prior to being able to get that solution, you and George, there were some maybe hoops you had to jump through, some things you had to do to get that dissolution.
Yes.
And one of those things would be going through like a counseling.
Yes.
You agree with that? Okay. And so I'm going to, Aaron, may I approach?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to hand you a document. You recognize it?
Yes, I do. This is the certificate of completion.
Okay. And it's a for what?
Helping children cope with family separation.
Okay. And is that what you go through before you could dissolve your marriage?
Yes, it was a class that was maybe a couple hours long, I believe.
And do you recall up there? Who drove you?
George?
Okay. And so you guys drove in a car together there, and I'm assuming he drove you home, right?
Yes.
So despite all these things, you guys are still getting along?
For the most part.
Okay. Now, I'm not clear about this.
You're not
agreement.
clear about a whole lot, but I digress.
So you had to go into a courtroom in front of a judge before you divorce your marriage, right?
Yes.
And in front of that judge, the judge told you that you were agreeing to George being the sole custodian, right?
Yeah.
And the judge also, you understood that all of it be supervised.
Yes.
You were asked if you understood that, and you said yes.
Yes.
Okay. And there was something in there about changing things at a later time, right?
No.
Okay. And so, say those were your wishes, right? The judge had made sure you.
No. My wishes. George told me that it was Terry, that's what was supposed to be done, and whenever I got my place in my own job, then I come back and would do the 50 thing.
Okay. So this sounds like something important that you wanted to put in writing, right? You didn't do that.
No.
Didn't your mother offer money to hire an attorney for you?
No, she doesn't have money.
Okay. All right. So if your mother comes in here and testifies that she ever offered you money.
Sustained.
Okay. And although you're telling us that these are things George had told you would happen or the way things would work out, why didn't you say this in open court in front of the judge?
Because he said that it would take longer to get the divorce done.
So
If we had to change all of the paperwork again.
Okay, but what I'm asking is the judge had asked you, is this your agreement? But at that time you didn't say, no, it's not, right?
Yes, I did say that.
Okay.
I think it's clear she trusted George to honor
If you
his
agree with me that you were
word.
asked in open court under oath, did you voluntarily sign the agreement and you said yes?
Yes.
In fact, you were also asked, have you been seeing him? And your answer is yes. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And when we say him, we're talking about your son, right?
Yes.
And then there's another question, as much as you would like, and your answer is, uh-huh. Do you remember that answer?
Yes.
Okay. And after reciting the details of this agreement, that George would be the sole custodian, that all visits would be supervised, you were asked, is there anything in the agreement that you are not satisfied with? And your answer is no. You would agree with that, right?
Yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, is your mother prescribed any prescription medication? Okay, let me rephrase this.
I know
There was
where
an
we're
incident in which
going.
You said that your daughter had tested positive for some type of prescription medication, right?
Yes.
And that is Xanaxes, right?
Yes.
And is your mother prescribed Xanaxes?
She's prescribed a lot of medications. I don't know which ones they are.
So is that a no, or you're just not sure?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Now, there was a lot of questions that you were asked about where you were asked about they or them. Let's be clear. Who was it that held your baby the day that you said she tested positive for Xanaxes?
Angela?
Okay. And what time is it that you were at the Wagner home that day?
I think around noonish,
Okay. And at what time were you at SOMC?
sometime after 7.
Okay. And so 7 hours later, you're bringing a 6-month-old baby to the ER. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, let me clear this up for you. See, you got to pay, this is where lawyers are tricky, okay? There's a big difference in what time did you get there? How long did you stay? And when did you go to the emergency room? Because she may have arrived at noon, which is what he asked her, and she answered, right? But it's also quite possible that she stayed for 6 hours and then left at 6 o'clock and noticed when she arrived home that the baby wasn't doing well. And so she drove to the emergency room. You see how that works? Sneaky, sneaky, Mr. Attorney Man.
Speaking of, you would agree with me, George had issues with, again, you being unsupervised with your child, with your son, right?
Yes.
Could you tell us, there was an incident in which there was peas, vegetables, and they were very hot, right?
Yes, they were not that hot, but yes, they were warm.
And what is it you did with your son's hand in those vegetables?
I let him touch them.
Did you let him touch them, or did you take his hand and put it?
I let him touch them to see that they were too hot for him to eat.
Okay. And there was an incident on a picnic table, right?
No, not exactly an incident. He fell off and I caught him.
All right. And
Look here, this happens far too often. I'm going to nip this right in the bud, okay? There are certain children that no matter how much you explain to them, they're going to be the child that touches the stove. No matter how many times you tell that child, don't touch that oven door, it's hot. They're the child that will touch it, okay? As a parent, you can try to prevent all manner of things from happening to your children. The fact of the matter is things happen, okay? Children touch things that are hot under the best of circumstances, no matter how well they're supervised. They fall, they bump, they bruise. It's all part of growing up. If she's such a bad mother, then why is there no history of CPS intervention? George.
all this time that there's that you do not have custody of your son, and according to you, you're being denied visitation, it was brought out in the direct testimony that you eventually filed something in the court to obtain custody, right? If I may help you, you were asked whether this was by an agreement or by a court order, and you said court order, right?
Yes.
And so that means that you actually had to have something filed to do this, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, remember back when I asked you about BCI agents visiting you and questioning you? Do you remember that question?
Yes.
And the BCI agents were visiting you to talk to you about the Wagners and George, right?
Yes.
Hey,
And
Allie, good to
isn't it
see you,
true that
babe.
it's the BCI agents who told you, finally, you should go file for custody. You should do this, right?
I'd forgotten about that. Yes.
In fact, you told them, well, I was just waiting to see what you guys were going to do. Do you remember telling them that?
I could have said that. I'm not sure.
Okay. And do you recall a time that you met with George at a park in Portsmouth?
Yes.
And it's over by the Kroger, right?
Yes.
And it was during that meeting that your son was there, right?
Yes.
And at that meeting is when you were told that George was going to Alaska. Okay, so there was no mention.
They said they were going to go up there in a few weeks to check it out.
Who was there at the park?
As far as I remember, it was George, Jake, my son, Sophia, and Angela, and someone on Sophia's side of the family.
Okay. And you were told what, though, about Alaska?
They were thinking about going up there to check it out.
Okay. All right. So, and I believe your testimony was that you didn't know that they went to Alaska. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And about visitation, isn't it true that George had invited you to come up to Alaska to visit with your son?
Yes, it is.
And he told you that he would pay your airfare, right?
Yes.
And as well as your daughter.
No.
How about, okay, but he was going to, well, I won't argue with you about that, but didn't he offer to pay for a hotel room for you to stay up there as well?
Yes.
And you declined that?
Yes, I didn't feel like dying.
We went through a lot of testimony about Facebook accounts, and we cleared that up a little bit ago, but there were these messages that you had with Hannah. Do you know how those copies were obtained?
Yes.
How is that?
BCI, I assume.
Okay, all right. And you talked about in the Wagner home, the dynamics. Do you recall telling BCI agents that when Billy is there, he's the one in charge?
Sort of, yes.
And when Billy's not there, then Angela's in charge, right?
Yes.
You're the parents there at that home, right?
Yes.
Okay. But I believe your testimony was that Angela is always the one in charge. That was your testimony on direct, right?
Yes.
Okay. But there's a difference now. You're just now admitting, or you're agreeing that you told BCI agents that when Billy was there, he was in charge, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Billy was very subtly there, though.
And we talked about some of the things that you said you weren't allowed to do at the Wagner home. And you talked to BCI agents as well about some of those things that you weren't allowed to do, right?
Yes.
In fact, there was a conversation about an accusation of you being, that you had stolen money, right?
Yes.
And who accused you of that?
Angela.
Okay. And you also said that you did not check the mail, right?
I was not allowed to go to the mailbox.
So do you remember a female by the name of Jennifer Comisford talking to you about that?
Is that one of
BCI
the
agent?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall being specifically asked by that agent, were you told you could go or you just chose not to?
Honestly, I'm not sure, but I know I wasn't allowed to go.
Okay. So if you had told the agent that you didn't do it to just avoid any accusations, that would be wrong, right?
What is it?
If you had told that BCI agent, I wasn't told I couldn't go to the mailbox, I just chose not to avoid any accusations. You're telling us that would be wrong, right? But you never said that.
I wasn't allowed to go to that mailbox.
You testified about this incident where you were pulled over by a trooper, is that right?
Yes.
You're not telling us that George is the reason, or George is who called and told them to pull you over, right?
I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that's more than likely what happened.
Okay. And, did
All right, let me stop you over here. Let me stop you right here, counselor, because we're going to argue semantics here. Here's the deal. When you're not allowed to do something as an adult, you still have the choice, right? You can still either follow the rule or break the rule, right? So if she's explaining that to the agent, likely that's what she's talking about. She followed the rule because she didn't want to be accused of anything, but there was a rule in place. Both things can be true. Please continue to argue semantics. It's working out so well for you.
anybody tell you that you did that?
Well, no, not at all, but his house is the one that I had left.
And who all was there when you left?
George, Jake, and Angela, maybe Billy. I'm not sure if Billy was there.
All right, ma'am, just hold on 1 second, okay?
My husband needs to pick up.
Ma'am, I asked you about, let me retrieve this document here, the certificate. Ma'am, I asked you about you not filing for custody until the BCI agent had told you that you should go ahead and do that, right?
Yes.
In fact, you ended up not getting custody until after George was arrested in this case, right?
About 3 months after that, but yes.
Okay. And so I had handed you a certificate. I'm going to have you identify that. I'm going to re-hand you that document. Could you just tell me what it is, and could you tell me the exhibit number that's marked on it?
The what?
There's a sticker on it. Could you tell me what that is? What number is on that?
2?
Okay, thank you. That's Defense Exhibit 2 that you have in your hand. I've got one more thing. I had asked you on cross-examination about the conversation that you had with your mother about Jay and your son. I'm going to hand this document to you and see if you recognize that. If you could, take a look at that document. Is that appear to be the conversation that we spoke of?
Yes.
Okay. And there's a exhibit sticker on there. Could you tell me what number that is?
1?
Okay, thank you. And just one more. Recall the questions that I had for you about your Facebook messages, and George being the perfect of you.
Yes.
That appeared to be the conversation that you had with me.
Yes.
And you identified the exhibit number.
3?
Thank you. That's right.
We've been at it for a while now, so we're going to take a recess, 15-minute recess. While we're at recess, the jurors are not to discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else, not to permit the case to be discussed with you or in your presence, not to form or express an opinion concerning the case, not to do any research concerning the facts of the law of the case from any source at all, not to read, view, or listen to any reports or accounts of the case.
First started dating George Wagner. You were
Okay. So, hold on a second. Sunday Doodles asks, Jen, do you think her spicy could cause a juror to question how victimized she was? I think, and I answered, but I want to answer out loud too, and I want to expound on it a little bit, and then I'm going to let you guys go. I dropped the link in chat for Allie's Live, which begins at noon my time, so in about 20 minutes by the time I'm finished and say goodbye and everything. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the cross-examination and whether or not the jury held her spicy testimony against her. My answer to that is no, and here's why. I think because the jury, I think they're human, and I think they understood why she was spicy with that, with the line of questioning as she was being asked. I mean, he was blaming her at 11 years old, acting like, she was in control of her life at 11. Like she had made these, decisions about her life and where she was going to live and who she was going to be with at 11 years old. I think that's preposterous. And I think the jury thinks that as well. I also think that the jury was more I think that the defense or I think Miss Canepa having Tabitha read the private messages between Hannah Mae and Tabitha at a time when it was really just two women with a shared experience of living in the same home, married to two brothers, and living under Angela. They were just commiserating. They weren't plotting anything. They weren't plotting anything or planning anything. They were just talking about their shared experience experiences and actually validating each other and being there for one another. Really, they were being supportive. You know, Hannah was encouraging Tabitha to pursue a formal of change in the custody arrangement, and Tabitha was doing the same for Hannah. They were being supportive and encouraging of one another, and I think um, because of that, I think that the jury likely still found Tabitha credible despite what the defense attorney was trying to do. I think that the record is very clear and the evidence is very clear that Angela was an incredibly controlling person and that she recognized that her sons needed to have women in their life, but once those went in an effort to have grandchildren, quite frankly, and once those two girls had given her grandchildren, they were useless to Angela at that point. And I think that Angela did anything and everything that she could to drive a wedge in between both of her sons' relationships. And the evidence when we get to tonight, when we get to Beth Ann's testimony, I think you're really going to see that. Because if that wasn't the case, then things with Beth Ann and Jake would have been just fine and dandy, but they weren't. And they weren't fine and dandy in large part because Jake is a killer, number one, but also because before and that's part of his personality. But before, Beth Ann knew any of that, Angela was busy working at driving a wedge between Jake and Beth Ann. And that's the type of woman that she is. And her pattern of behavior continued. And it wasn't that she was, overbearing and controlling because Hannah and Tabitha were incompetent. They weren't good mothers. And so Angela felt like she had to step in because if she didn't, then, her grandchildren wouldn't be safe or wouldn't be taken care of or whatever. That's not why she did it. She did it because those girls were a means to an end. She wanted grandchildren and she had sons. And the only way to have that's how procreation works. It's biology. She needed those women to her were nothing but wombs. That's it. That's all. And I think that I do see this happen. So Sunday asks, do you ever see strong women get less sympathy from the jury? Yes. Typically, strong women who stand up for themselves and who, when an attorney is asking them questions on the stand, if the questions are biting and the tone is, condescending or combative, and the female witness responds in kind, a lot of times it looks bad for them, but mainly it looks bad for them when they're the defendant, not usually just a witness. I think that, I think that, I think it was fine. And yes, Rachel, this is an excellent point. Rachel says, I feel like her spicy isn't disrespectful. It reads more fed up. It does. To me, it reads as a woman who's been through a lot and has realized her own strength and is not going to be bullied by this family anymore, whether that is directly from the members of the family or by extension through their attorney. And in this case, it's George's attorney. I think Tabitha has had all she can stand and she can't stand anymore. And, that's just, my perception of it. So for tonight, we're going to go over Beth Ann's testimony. And Beth Ann is who Jake married while in Alaska. And then when the Wagner family got word that the authorities were starting to sniff around and put things together, they decided, let's not stick around in Alaska. Let's go back to Ohio so we can keep on top of this whole situation. I think that things got progressively worse when that happened for Beth Ann. I think that if I'm remembering Beth Ann's testimony accurately or correctly, I think that there was some hints of the level of dysfunction and control that existed in the Wagner family. I believe it occurred on her wedding night. If I remember correctly, something happened, and I cannot remember exactly what it was that happened, but something happened, and Beth and Jake did not spend their wedding night together, if I remember correctly. And then hints of what was to come happened during the road trip from Alaska back to Ohio. So we're going to definitely talk about all of that tonight. I'll be back live at 9 Central, 10 Eastern. I hope you guys can join me. I know that's kind of late for you guys on the East Coast, and it is a school night. So I hope that you guys will catch me then. And I want to thank all of you guys for being here today. If you haven't done so already, could you do me a favor and give your girl a thumbs up on the stream? I would appreciate it very, very much. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Sunday. And I will see you later tonight. But before that, I'll see you over in Alex Erickson's chat in about 15 minutes. She's going to cover more of Florida versus Wade Wilson. He is known as the Deadpool killer. He is also a piece of work. So anyway, thank you guys, and I will see you all later. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Cause it's Friday, you ain't got no job, and you ain't got shit to do. Well, fuck you.
No malicious intent or effort was towards it.
No malicious.
Minutes later.
We all do a little mad sometimes.
Man,